All right, let me call this meeting order. Senator Walker, if you would, come on up, please, sir.
This is my friend.
You want to be at the podium or the table?
With me, whatever you prefer, Mr. Chairman.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we have in front of you today Senate Bill 195, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I move to pass.
And this thing looks relatively simple to something what we had earlier, which would have been Representative Martin's House Bill 155. I want to get Claire, if you would, to make this a little bit quicker for us. Could you tell us what the two differences are in these two bills? I know that Chairman Martin's bill started out with certain professions, public safety professions.
The two bills are similar. The major, or the difference is that Chairman Martin's bill exempts healthcare workers, law enforcement officers, and firefighters from the expedited or licensure by endorsement provisions. This bill does.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Mr. Chairman, this is the first time I've ever presented a bill to your committee, so I'm honored to be here. A little intimidated, but I'll try to get through it.
You do know we're all friends, don't you?
So I have Senate Bill 195 LC 460588S. I started out with a much broader bill than this, and the substitute on the Senate side was just to make it relative to military and their spouses. So that's what we have here. I imagine that most of you experience the same thing I experience when you talk to industry or business owners, no matter what industry sector they're in. Throughout the state, the biggest challenge, if you ask them what challenges you're facing, the biggest challenge they face is workforce. And yet we have this what I think is an onerous occupational licensing system that puts up really unnecessary barriers to people to be able to work. And so I'm presenting the Freedom to Work Act. And if you look in section 24 through lines 24 through 27, it defines a occupational license to include an occupational, on line 26 and 27, to include an occupational specialty, certification, or other document earned in the military. And then, so what this bill is going to do is going to give an expedited occupational license to a member of the military or their spouse who have been transferred to Georgia in service of their country, so that they're not having to wait. Oftentimes it's the spouse having to wait 90, 120, 180 days before they can earn a paycheck. And that's essentially what this bill does. So they've got to have held a valid license in another state in a similar field, similar scope of practice, and they have to be in good standing in that other state, have no complaint or allegation or investigation pending, they have to not have a disqualifying criminal record. They have to pass any exam that is state-specific to Georgia, and then pay all the applicable licensing fees. So that's 7 criteria. If they meet those 7 criteria and they apply for a license, After meeting all those 7 criteria, the Occupational Licensing Board will have to issue them a license within 30 days. I met with the Secretary of State's office. They are supportive of this. They asked me to push the effective date back, which we did push it back to March 1 of 2024. They tell me they're implementing a new, like every state agency seems to be these days, implementing a new computer system or software system. And they think with that new system, they think they can comply with this, is my understanding. I don't want to speak for them, but we have had several conversations, and they certainly support the concept of this. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. Number 11, that would be Chairman.
Yes. Question about the 30 days.
All right.
Are all the boards back meeting every month? I know some of these boards may or may not meet every 30 days.
So that is correct. So I think a lot of the boards, so I had somebody in Senate Research look, we have 42 occupational licenses under this code section 42. And then there's occupational licenses in other parts of the code section. We have occupational licenses for things like used watch dealer. I mean, just all kind of stuff. We had a bill in the Senate today to add another occupational license, actually. But no, they don't meet monthly. Some of them only meet quarterly. Some don't even meet that often. But to me, they need to meet more often, or they need to meet virtually, or they need to figure it out and let these people go to work. I mean, most people can't go 90 days without a paycheck. And I represent an area with Robins Air Force Base, and every time the 21st Century Partnership, which is their advocacy group, meets, this is one of the top frustrations the military members have, is getting their occupational licenses. Let's say you're serving your country, your wife's a dental hygienist, she's got to wait 90, 120 days to be able to work. I mean, that's just not fair. And it's not good for our workforce. It's not good for our economy. So that's their problem, to figure out how to, if they're not meeting often enough, they can just meet more often, is what I think. It's a little bold maybe, but.
All right. Number 22. Who is 22? All right, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, thank you for this bill. I represent the 3rd Infantry Division down at Fort Stewart. I see it a lot. Unfortunately, as I've researched, I've looked for the enemy, and it is us. 8 years ago, we passed a bill that was not nearly as far-reaching. It was very specific for licensing to address problems of military people coming in and not being able to work for so long because they couldn't get a license. Nothing happened when we passed the bill. The big problem was the bureaucrats sat on it, didn't tell folk they were eligible, didn't help them at all. This has happened for 8 years. After 20 years in this legislature, I have noticed that we have a habit of letting the tail wag the head. I'm so tired of folk asking the question, well, what does the department think of this? Why don't we go home and let the department be the legislature if we're afraid to legislate? Now, we're going to pass a bill. There needs to be a way to enforce it, and these boards that can't meet, get folk off the board and put people on the board that will meet. This is a shame, people waiting for jobs, and they got jobs and sitting on a board and doing nothing. Now, this will not endear me to them, but I'm the proverbial mule who is now seeing the barn, so I could care less. But we need to change our attitude about who is making laws in this state and who's requiring them to be enforced.
Thank you, Representative. You may serve on the Georgia Joint Defense Commission with me.
Yes, I do.
The governor stood this up, some legislation Chairman Blackman and I worked on a number of years ago, and the Governor Kemp stood that up, and I'm on the Georgia Joint Defense Commission with you, and this is an issue that every time we meet,
That's right.
and we don't meet monthly, but every time we meet, they bring this up. And it's something the Department of Defense looks at as far as trying to designate you as a military-friendly state. And it impacts whether you're going to get new missions and keep missions, and it's important, I think.
All right. Number 1. That would, all right, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the sound of that. I really enjoy, I like your bill. As a part of a licensed, I'm a mental health professional, I know that the costs can be prohibitive sometimes. And in your same example with the military family moving with the dental hygienist, I can see where, and I don't know how much a dental hygienist license talks, but I know that some of them can be several $100s. Was there any talk, or is there any talk about lowering the fees? If you already have a license, say in South Carolina, do you have to pay the full fee in Georgia? I think that could also help with the workforce shortage.
I think that's a great thought. I did drop a Senate resolution to establish a study committee on occupational licenses, and the Lieutenant Governor has announced that he's going to appoint that study committee. I'll chair it, and we're going to look at all the fees. We're going to look at whether all of these 42 plus licenses, which ones are even relevant anymore, and any barriers that we see. I think this is great for military spouses, but I fundamentally believe that it ought to be broader than that even. I mean, if you're licensed, I just think the economy, the world we live in with the transitory nature of people and this vibrant growing economy we have, and you've seen all these industry announcements and job announcements for Georgia, where are the people? They're going to have to come from out of state. And we're not growing, our birth rate is not enough to keep up with the workforce demands. And so I'd like to see this even broader, but I thought this was something that was very helpful to the military that we could possibly pass. And we're going to look at the fees and all the other requirements and make recommendations after we do our study committee. Thank you.
Let's see, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I served on the state funeral board for 9+ years, and of course we did meet every month. But there is, as we've said, there are a lot of these boards that don't. Do you think it would behoove us to work with the Secretary of State, or if it has to be done through legislation, to have like an oversight board that's made up of some medical, some cosmetologists, and others of all these 43 different licensing boards that could expedite these type professional certifications as they move to Georgia, so that's what they do. They can meet, and whether it's virtual or in person, that hear these cases that are coming back, and let the Secretary of State do the proper background checks and report to these boards for approval, especially for those that don't meet a lot.
That might help. I have talked to the Secretary of State, and he tells me that his priority is trying to streamline and make the licensing boards more efficient. So he's really focused on it. So I think some conversations with him would be in order to see what he might think would help.
All right, any other questions from the committee? I'd like to ask a question of our council, Senator. If I might say to the committee members, if y'all may remember, we had Chairman Martin's bill 155 earlier that was pretty close to this. And if y'all remember, this bill was sent back to this committee from the Rules Committee. And a couple of reasons. One, they didn't think it went far enough. But then on the other part, they also had an exemption for firefighters, law enforcement personnel, and medical personnel. Of course, those aren't licensed by the Secretary of State's office, to the best of my knowledge. Would his bill, the Senator's bill, Claire, Council, would it interfere with those? Because we don't want your bill being sent back to the committee
Yes, sir.
from the powers that be.
thought, and I didn't draft this bill, but in looking at the code section that it's located in, it relates to professions and businesses. So healthcare providers are licensed under Title 43. So then they would fall under the category of the gentleman's bill. As for law enforcement officers and firefighters, I would have to look in the title. I'm not sure if they're among one of the categories that are regulated by it, but I can check for sure.
All right. I think the reason they did that was because firefighters and public safety people, they're post-certified. They go through specific training in Georgia, and that was a concern there, and the healthcare providers. But let's see, we got a few questions now.
To Mr. Chairman, I discussed some of this with Ledge Council, and our thinking was the way the bill reads, if they're not in Code Section 43, it doesn't impact those. So attorneys, for example, are not in Code Section 43, so it doesn't impact licensing for attorneys. And I don't know where I don't think law enforcement's in Title 43. They're, of course, post-certified, and I think it's in a different section, but I really don't know for sure. Now, the medical field is, and I think that's, I would hate to exempt medical because so much of the military training, I mean, a lot of people in the military have medical training and become, very good EMTs or nurses and that's where we have a severe shortage of workers. So I would resist eliminating that or exempting that, but of course I want my bill to move forward also.
Well, you know what, quite frankly, we want your bill moved also, as long as Reverend Williams don't start talking about cosmetologists again.
Again, I so declare.
All right, let's see. Mr. Williams.
I was listening very closely, and you're exactly right. When it comes to the field of health, I never understood why a person could triage and work in emergency medicine in a war zone and come back and jump through loops to be licensed in Georgia. I never understood it. We have well-trained people who come back, and all of a sudden, we must be prima donnas in this state because we don't want anybody that we don't test ourselves. I'm sorry, ain't nobody ever asked the guy on the battlefield, where'd you get your license from? Never.
Ms. Bennett.
I have an easy question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a timeline. On line 59, indicate that for this license provision, that passes any examination that may only be required to demonstrate knowledge of the laws and rules and regulations of this state specific to the practice of the profession. I have two questions. Is that required for each person seeking this type of license? The taking of an expedited license, is that required for everyone, or will the board determine if an examination is required?
Well, there's a licensing board for each different type of license, and some issues such as insurance. I'm an insurance agent. There are state-specific laws for, like workers' comp, for example, is a state-by-state regulated. So work comp in Georgia is very different than workers' comp in Texas. So yes, you would have to pass an exam to prove that you understand the Georgia laws specific to your occupation, but not beyond that. So I wouldn't have to pass a test to understand what a homeowner's policy does, but I have to understand anything that's just specific to Georgia.
I understand, Senator. Thank you for that, and I do support this bill. However, my follow-up question regarding the taking of examinations, the reason why I asked that is because you have a 30-day, what was that I saw? that expedited license will be rendered in 30 days. And so my question was really more pertaining to if this is a requirement for each person seeking an expedited license in the state of Georgia, does the 30 days give that board chance to give that examination? That's my only concern, the 30 days.
Very good question. This same question came up in the Senate committee that I presented to, and I'll reiterate, I tried to cover it on the front end, but I probably wasn't very clear. The 30 days starts after you meet all 7 of the requirements, lines 44 through 63. Once you've complied with all of that, submitted your application with your payment, if they can check all 7 of those boxes, then they ought to issue you a license.
Anything
Was that-
else? Representative? All right. Representative McDonald?
One, I was going to kind of follow up with that, with a professional license, where they have testing centers that are constantly administering the different professions of testing. It's not issued by the state per se. It's done through these local testing centers around the state where you can go and take these professional licensing tests. You know immediately whether you pass or fail on those. Secondly, I was going to follow up with the difference in your legislation here, this bill. It's all about licensing, where you separate with, like, I'm going to do the firefighter EMT that works at a station. They're required to have, most large municipalities are required to have both firefighter and EMT. One's a certificate and one is a license. The medical side is a license, like you mentioned, but everything with law enforcement or even kind of the public safety, fire and law enforcement is a certificate, different certificates you get for accreditation. So I just wanted to throw that out about that word certificate that might help with firefighter and law enforcement, since that's kind of what the area they're under.
All right. Any further questions from any of the committee members? No? Do we have anybody here who wishes to testify? If you could, identify yourself and come on up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee members, and thank you, Senator Walker. My name is Mark Gonsalves. I'm the director of the Frontline Conservative Business Alliance, and we have hundreds of businesses here in Georgia that fall under our purview. For me, this is a bill that is a jobs creator. And if you think about it, right, our position on the national stage is the #1 place to do business, and I think this bill is very consistent with that particular objective. I do think that our military and their families have given so much to our country for the freedoms that we enjoy every single day. And I think it'd be very appropriate if we try to do something to give back to them, because they've given so much to us. So I'm all in favor of SB 195.
Well, we thank you very much for your comments. Anybody have a question to the gentleman? I see none. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Do we
very
have
much.
anyone else that wishes to be heard on this matter? If not, what's the will of the committee?
Chairman, I move to do fast. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I got a comment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I didn't ask any questions. I don't really have any questions. I'm excited to see the process as we evaluate these occupational licenses to get folks to work, because that's an important mantra of what I believe, that, the society is in a better spot when people are able to get a job, a meaningful job, in a faster manner. So I look forward to supporting this legislation.
Very good. Any further discussion? Chairman Collins.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Senator Walker, for this bill. I echo what my friend, Representative Carpenter, had to say. Do you have anything, Mr. Chairman, that we need to add to this bill to perfect it so that rules might not kick it back down to us?
Well, the only thing I can say, if rules kicks it down, then we'll have a call meeting and we'll see if we can correct it for the good senator. I always try to look after my friends. Representative Vayner.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say, as a physical therapist that's licensed in the state of Georgia, I support the bill.
Well, there you go, Senator. I don't know that you can get much more better than all of this kumbaya up here. All right, we have a motion and we have a second. We've had discussion. If there's anything else, anyone has a subsequent motion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Senator, your bill will be on the way to rules.
Thank you. Thank you all. Congratulations.
Now, which, Senator, which committees do you serve on over in the Senate?
I serve on the Senate Rules Committee. That might be of interest to
What
you.
about regulated industries?
No, sir, I haven't been privileged to be on that. I'm on
What about-
Health and Human
What
Services.
about economic development?
No, sir.
Jeez. Good enough. Thank you, Senator. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting stands adjourned. There you go.